The study of the metaphysical nature and structure of reality is a subject that has intrigued philosophers and physicists alike for centuries. Despite advances in physics, there is still a great deal of debate about what reality actually is and how it is structured. One of the most fundamental concepts in physics is that of space-time. Space-time is the four-dimensional framework in which all physical events occur. According to the theory of special relativity, space and time are not separate entities, but are instead part of a single entity called space-time. This means that the geometry of space-time is curved by the presence of mass and energy, and that this curvature is responsible for the force of gravity. Another key concept in physics is that of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the branch of physics that deals with the behavior of matter and energy at the microscopic level. At this level, particles such as electrons and photons exhibit wave-like behavior, and their properties are described by wave functions. These wave functions determine the probability of finding a particle in a particular location or with a particular property. One of the most intriguing aspects of quantum mechanics is the phenomenon of entanglement. Entanglement occurs when two particles become linked in such a way that the properties of one particle are correlated with the properties of the other particle, no matter how far apart they are. This has led some physicists to propose that reality is not actually made up of separate objects, but is instead a single, interconnected entity. Another concept that has been proposed to describe the nature of reality is the holographic principle. According to this principle, the information contained in a three-dimensional volume can be encoded on a two-dimensional surface surrounding that volume. This has led some physicists to propose that the universe itself may be a hologram, with all of the information about the universe encoded on a two-dimensional surface that surrounds us. The concept of the multiverse is another idea that has been proposed to explain the nature of reality. According to this idea, there may be multiple universes, each with its own set of physical laws and constants. This could explain why the physical constants in our universe seem to be fine-tuned for the existence of life. Finally, some physicists have proposed that reality itself may be a simulation. This idea is based on the observation that the laws of physics seem to be incredibly well suited to the existence of intelligent life. Some scientists have suggested that this could be because the universe is actually a computer simulation created by an advanced civilization. The concept of consciousness is one of the most mysterious and difficult concepts to understand in philosophy and science. Consciousness refers to the subjective experience of being aware of one's thoughts, feelings, and surroundings. It is the quality of awareness that allows us to experience the world around us and to have a sense of self. The planes of consciousness are a concept that is often associated with spiritual and mystical traditions. According to this concept, there are multiple levels or planes of consciousness that individuals can experience, each with its own unique qualities and characteristics. These planes of consciousness are often depicted as ascending levels, with higher levels representing a greater degree of awareness and enlightenment. In recent years, there has been a growing interest among scientists in exploring the relationship between consciousness and the brain. While the exact nature of this relationship is still not fully understood, many scientists believe that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain's complex neural networks. According to this view, consciousness arises from the interactions between neurons and the complex feedback loops that occur within the brain. However, the concept of the planes of consciousness suggests that there may be more to consciousness than just the physical workings of the brain. Some proponents of this idea suggest that there may be higher levels of consciousness that are not bound by the physical limitations of the brain. They argue that these higher levels of consciousness may be accessible through spiritual practices such as meditation, yoga, or psychedelic experiences. One possible way to reconcile these seemingly disparate views is to consider the possibility that consciousness exists on multiple levels or planes, both within and beyond the physical brain. According to this view, the physical brain may be responsible for generating lower levels of consciousness, while higher levels of consciousness may be accessed through spiritual practices that allow individuals to transcend their physical limitations. However, the concept of the planes of consciousness suggests that there may be more to consciousness than just the physical workings of the brain. Some proponents of this idea suggest that there may be higher levels of consciousness that are not bound by the physical limitations of the brain. They argue that these higher levels of consciousness may be accessible through spiritual practices such as meditation, yoga, or psychedelic experiences. One possible way to reconcile these seemingly disparate views is to consider the possibility that consciousness exists on multiple levels or planes, both within and beyond the physical brain. According to this view, the physical brain may be responsible for generating lower levels of consciousness, while higher levels of consciousness may be accessed through spiritual practices that allow individuals to transcend their physical limitations. This idea is consistent with the concept of the planes of consciousness, which suggests that there are multiple levels of consciousness that can be accessed through spiritual practices. However, it also acknowledges the importance of the physical brain in generating consciousness, and suggests that the different levels of consciousness may be interconnected in complex ways. Julius Evola was an Italian philosopher and esotericist who is known for his contributions to traditionalist thought, which emphasizes the importance of spiritual and cultural values that are grounded in traditional societies. Evola's work is characterized by a combination of elements from various philosophical and spiritual traditions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and Hermeticism, and he is often associated with the far-right movements in Europe. Evola's ideas have been controversial, with some scholars arguing that they promote reactionary and authoritarian views. However, his work also contains insights into the nature of consciousness, the metaphysical structure of reality, and the role of tradition in contemporary society, which can be analyzed using academic language. One of the key themes in Evola's work is the concept of transcending the limitations of the ego or self. According to Evola, the ego is a product of the material world and is limited by its identification with physical existence. In order to achieve higher levels of consciousness, individuals must transcend their identification with the ego and enter into a state of pure awareness that is not bound by physical limitations. This idea is consistent with the concept of the planes of consciousness, which suggests that there are higher levels of awareness that can be accessed through spiritual practices. Evola's emphasis on the importance of transcending the limitations of the ego can be seen as an attempt to bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual worlds, and to explore the possibility of accessing higher levels of consciousness. Another key theme in Evola's work is the concept of the eternal or timeless. According to Evola, the material world is characterized by impermanence and change, and it is only by connecting with the eternal that individuals can find meaning and purpose in life. This idea is consistent with the concept of the holographic principle, which suggests that the information contained in the universe is encoded on a two-dimensional surface that is outside of time and space. Evola's emphasis on the eternal can also be seen in his ideas about tradition. According to Evola, tradition represents the accumulated wisdom and spiritual knowledge of past civilizations, and it is through a connection with tradition that individuals can find meaning and purpose in life. This idea is consistent with the concept of cultural evolution, which suggests that cultural values and practices evolve over time and can provide a framework for understanding the world. Postmodernism is a philosophical and cultural movement that emerged in the late 20th century, characterized by skepticism towards grand narratives and a rejection of absolute truth and objectivity. While postmodernism has brought about many positive changes, such as promoting diversity and challenging oppressive power structures, it has also been criticized for contributing to a number of negative social trends, such as short attention spans and a lack of respect for tradition. One of the most pressing issues associated with the postmodern world is the increasing tendency towards violence between different groups. This is due in part to the fragmentation and polarization of society, as different groups become more isolated from each other and find it difficult to communicate or find common ground. This is particularly evident in the rise of identity politics, which tends to prioritize individual identity over shared values and ideals. This trend towards violence and fragmentation can be understood in the context of the Hindu concept of the Kali Yuga, which is a period of spiritual darkness and moral decay. According to this tradition, the world goes through cycles of decay and renewal, and the current age is characterized by increasing materialism and spiritual ignorance. In this context, the rise of postmodernism and its associated social trends can be seen as symptoms of the Kali Yuga and an indication of the need for a return to traditional values and practices. One way to counteract the negative trends of the postmodern world and turn away from decadence is through the embrace of neo-traditionalism. Neo-traditionalism is a movement that seeks to reinterpret traditional values and practices in a way that is relevant to the contemporary world. This approach recognizes the importance of tradition in shaping cultural values and practices, but also acknowledges the need for adaptation and evolution. By embracing neo-traditionalism, individuals can reconnect with the timeless wisdom of the past and find meaning and purpose in life. This approach can help to counteract the short attention spans and lack of respect for tradition that are prevalent in the postmodern world, and promote a more inclusive and harmonious society. The ideas of Julius Evola and postmodernism can be understood in the context of the mythical and metaphysical nature of reality. Both of these approaches recognize that reality is not merely a material phenomenon, but is also shaped by metaphysical and spiritual forces. Evola's approach emphasizes the importance of tradition and spiritual practice as a means of transcending the limitations of the material world. He argues that modernity has led to a loss of connection with these transcendent forces, and that this has contributed to the decay of Western civilization. For Evola, the mythical and metaphysical dimensions of reality are crucial for understanding the true nature of human existence, and for accessing higher levels of consciousness. Postmodernism, on the other hand, challenges the idea of a universal and objective reality, and emphasizes the importance of subjective experience and interpretation. This approach recognizes that the way we understand and interact with reality is shaped by cultural, historical, and personal factors. Postmodernism also challenges traditional forms of knowledge and authority, and seeks to empower marginalized voices and perspectives. Despite their differences, both Evola and postmodernism recognize the importance of the mythical and metaphysical dimensions of reality. They also both acknowledge the limitations of the material world, and the need to transcend these limitations in order to access higher levels of consciousness and understanding. Moreover, the idea of the Kali Yuga, as discussed earlier, can also be understood in the context of the mythical and metaphysical nature of reality. This Hindu concept recognizes that reality is not static, but rather goes through cycles of decay and renewal. It emphasizes the importance of spiritual practice as a means of transcending the limitations of the material world, and of accessing higher levels of consciousness and understanding. The concept of the divergence line suggests that there is a natural convergence between the logical and the morally right, despite their apparent polarity. This means that what is logical is also inherently moral, and vice versa. The concept of the divergence line can be seen in various aspects of nature and human behavior, such as mutualist relationships, peaceful conflict resolution, and stoicism. One example of the convergence between logic and morality can be seen in the concept of mutualism in nature. Mutualism refers to a symbiotic relationship between two different species that benefits both parties. For example, bees and flowers have a mutualistic relationship because the bees help to pollinate the flowers, while the flowers provide nectar and pollen for the bees. In this relationship, both parties benefit from their interactions with each other, and it is both logical and moral for them to continue their relationship. Another example of the convergence between logic and morality can be seen in the peaceful and diplomatic resolution of conflicts. Conflict resolution that is based on peaceful and diplomatic methods is not only moral, but also logical. This is because peaceful conflict resolution avoids the negative consequences of violent conflict, such as loss of life and property damage. Therefore, it is both logical and moral to resolve conflicts through peaceful means. Stoicism is also an example of the convergence between logic and morality. Stoicism is a philosophy that emphasizes the importance of reason, self-control, and moral virtue. It suggests that by using our reason and controlling our emotions, we can make rational and moral decisions. This is because emotions can often cloud our judgment and lead us to make decisions that are not logical or moral. Therefore, it is both logical and moral to practice Stoicism in our daily lives. The concept of the divergence line is important in neo-traditionalism because it suggests that pursuing logic and reason is not only beneficial in terms of achieving our goals, but also in terms of living a moral life. This is because logic and morality are inherently linked, and by pursuing logic, we are making the moral choice. This value can be seen in almost every major world religion, as they all emphasize the importance of moral behavior and rational thinking. For example, Christianity emphasizes the importance of love and charity, while also emphasizing the importance of following the moral law. Buddhism emphasizes the importance of mindfulness and compassion, while also emphasizing the importance of right thinking and action. There are many historical examples of the convergence between logic and morality that can be seen through the concept of the divergence line. One such example is the philosophy of Confucianism, which emphasizes the importance of moral behavior, respect for authority, and social order. Confucianism also emphasizes the importance of education and rational thinking, suggesting that by pursuing knowledge and reason, we can live a moral life. Another example is the philosophy of Stoicism, which was popular in ancient Greece and Rome. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of reason, self-control, and moral virtue, suggesting that by using our reason and controlling our emotions, we can make rational and moral decisions. In Julius Evola's work, particularly in his book Ride the Tiger, we can see the convergence between logic and morality in his emphasis on the importance of spiritual and moral values. Evola suggests that in the modern world, individuals are often lost and aimless, lacking any true sense of purpose or direction. He argues that by pursuing spiritual and moral values, we can find meaning and purpose in life, and live a life that is both logical and moral. Evola also emphasizes the importance of individualism and self-mastery, suggesting that by mastering ourselves, we can achieve a state of inner strength and independence. This is another example of the convergence between logic and morality, as self-mastery is not only logical but also moral, as it allows us to live a life that is guided by reason and moral virtue. Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver can be seen as a representation of the modern individual who is lost and aimless, lacking any true sense of purpose or direction. Bickle is disillusioned with the world around him, seeing it as a disgusting city of slums and vice. He is also deeply alienated from the people around him, feeling disconnected and isolated from society. As a neo-traditionalist, Bickle can either be a rebel in a disgusting city of slum, going along with its ways to fit in while remaining a rebel in his head like Winston Smith in 1984, or Bernard Marx in Brave New World. Or he can be a pioneer for change and aggressive in his pursuit, although at the risk of cancellation. In the former case, Bickle would be similar to Winston Smith or Bernard Marx, who both rebel against the dystopian societies in which they live, but ultimately are unable to effect real change. They remain rebels in their minds, but they conform to the norms of society in order to survive. In the latter case, Bickle would be a pioneer for change, aggressively pursuing his vision of a better world. This would put him at risk of cancellation, as his views would be seen as radical and threatening by the mainstream society. However, he would be following the fundamental nature of reality, which supports truth and the unwavering human spirit that fights against nihilism. Regardless of the path Bickle chooses, the concept of the divergence line can be seen in his journey. Bickle is a complex character who is torn between his logical and moral impulses. He is driven by a desire to make a difference and to be a force for good in the world, but he is also prone to violent outbursts and erratic behavior. Ultimately, Bickle's journey can be seen as a metaphor for the struggle between modernity and tradition. In the modern world, individuals are often lost and alienated, lacking any true sense of purpose or direction. However, By embracing traditional values and pursuing moral virtue, individuals like Bickle can find meaning and purpose in life. The concept of the divergence line suggests that the choices which are inherently moral are also inherently logical, and by pursuing logic instead of emotion, we are actually making the moral choice. This idea can be seen in many works of classic literature and film. In this essay, we will examine 5 examples of the divergence line in action, and explore how these works support the fundamental connection between morality and logic. One classic example of the divergence line can be seen in the character of Atticus Finch in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus is a lawyer in the Deep South who takes on the defense of a black man accused of raping a white woman. While many people in his community are opposed to his decision, Atticus argues that it is the logical and moral choice. He believes in the importance of justice and fairness, even when it goes against the prevailing social norms. By standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, Atticus exemplifies the idea of the divergence line. Another example of the divergence line can be found in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. In this novel, the protagonist Raskolnikov believes that he is justified in killing a pawnbroker because he sees it as a logical means to an end. However, as he begins to grapple with the morality of his actions, he realizes that the moral and logical choices are not always the same. Raskolnikov ultimately realizes that the act of murder was not only immoral, but also illogical, as it did not lead to the outcome he had hoped for. The concept of the divergence line can also be seen in the film A Clockwork Orange, directed by Stanley Kubrick. The protagonist, Alex, is a violent criminal who is subjected to an experimental treatment that turns him into a docile and non-violent individual. While the treatment may be seen as a logical solution to the problem of violent crime, it is also a deeply immoral act that violates Alex's fundamental human rights. The film explores the tension between morality and logic, highlighting the dangers of pursuing logic at the expense of ethics. Another classic work that illustrates the divergence line is William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. The title character is torn between his desire for revenge and his sense of moral responsibility. While it may be logical to seek revenge for his father's murder, Hamlet realizes that this act will also have moral consequences. He struggles to find a balance between his logical and moral impulses, ultimately leading to his tragic downfall. Finally, the concept of the divergence line can be seen in the novel 1984 by George Orwell. The protagonist, Winston Smith, is a rebel against the oppressive government of his society. While it may be logical for Winston to conform to the norms of the society in order to survive, he recognizes the moral imperative to resist the government's oppressive actions. Through Winston's struggles, the novel highlights the importance of pursuing morality, even when it goes against the prevailing logic. Socionics, as a theory of psychological types and intertype relations, provides a unique perspective on the concept of the divergence line. According to socionics, each individual possesses a specific information metabolism that determines their cognitive preferences and social behavior. In this sense, the divergence line can be seen as a result of intertype relations, which are the interactions between individuals with different information metabolisms. In particular, the concept of quadra values in socionics sheds light on the nature of the divergence line. Each of the 4 socionic quadras, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, has a specific set of values that inform their worldview and behavior. For example, the alpha quadra values creativity, innovation, and personal growth, while the delta quadra values stability, tradition, and practicality. When individuals from different quadras interact, they may initially appear to be on opposite sides of the divergence line, with one prioritizing logic and the other morality. However, in socionics, the goal of intertype relations is to find a balance between the quadra values. This can result in a complementary relationship in which the logical and moral aspects of a situation are both considered and respected. Furthermore, socionics provides a framework for understanding the metaphysical nature of reality in relation to the divergence line. According to socionics, the information metabolism of each individual is linked to a specific information element. These elements are fundamental components of reality that are present in all aspects of human experience, from thought and emotion to physical phenomena. The four information elements in socionics are logic, ethics, sensation, and intuition. Each element has its own unique qualities and functions, but they are all interdependent and contribute to the overall structure of reality. The divergence line can be seen as a manifestation of the tension between logic and ethics, or between T and phi. However, this tension is not necessarily a negative force, as it can lead to a deeper understanding of the underlying principles of reality. The concept of the metaphysical nature of reality has fascinated humans for centuries, leading to the development of numerous philosophical and scientific theories. One such theory, proposed by Carl Jung, suggests that our understanding of reality is shaped by our psyche and the collective unconscious. This idea is supported by recent discoveries in the field of quantum physics, which suggest that our perceptions of reality are subjective and influenced by the observer effect. Jung's theory posits that there is a collective unconscious that exists beyond the individual psyche, containing archetypes and symbols that are universal across cultures and history. These archetypes are patterns of behavior and thought that are inherited and ingrained in our unconscious minds. Our perceptions of reality are therefore shaped by these archetypes, as they influence our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.